We are not alone. You are watching Contact TV with your hosts, Leslie Mitchell-Clarke
and Wes Roberts,
exploring ufology, metaphysics, and beyond with the world's foremost experts.
And a very good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you folks happen to be in the multiverse. And welcome to another episode of Contact TV. And I'm sorry to say that my usual host, Wes Roberts, cannot be here. He's off hobnobbing with other wizards, but he will return anon. And we're kicking off our 12th season because we're old-fashioned and we think in terms of seasons. So we're so happy to have back with us really one of our most favored guests, a good friend, a delightful human being, and one of the most fascinating people that I know. Captain Randy Cramer, USMC SS, is here with us today to talk about a lot of exciting things. Welcome, Randy. Thank you so much for joining me today on Contact TV.
Thank you so much for having me. Glad to be here.
All righty. So a lot has been happening, I know, and you've done so many media appearances, so many appearances at conventions where you've talked in great detail about your personal experiences. And I know that now you are segueing into a whole nother timeline of what you wish to do and see and be, and that includes a big educational component. So I just would love for you to tell the folks out there what you're doing right now and how they can jump on it.
Yeah, I figured talking about that other stuff for 10 years was good enough, and I didn't necessarily need to do it anymore. Mm-hmm. I also just don't think a lot of it's really relevant. An interesting, fun story. Cool, it's fun and interesting. I get that people like fun and interesting stories, but there's a certain relevancy about continuing to kind of have this conversation for 10 years about something that once we've really understood the topic a bit, we can move on to the next conversation. And I think a lot of people have been a little slow to move on from that conversation to the next conversation. And the next conversation is really, now what? That we know that information. And now that we know that information, that gives people who are working out issues with memory stuff and being in programs that they have some framework to work their own stuff out without necessarily thinking that they're just lost their minds, which is always the first thing that happens to someone who's going through that experience, is you start to feel like you're unraveling, that you're losing your freaking mind. So that gives an access path for people, which is, I think, one of the things that we're the most proud of, is that we've, macheted our way through a path that a lot of other people have been able to follow through now. So there's been some people who have more than, when I came along, there was just me. More people since obviously have been talking about their experiences, and not all of them may be the best people in the world. I don't want to mention names, but we know what we're talking about.
We do.
And but that's not but I don't want to poo-poo on anybody. Everyone's got a story. Everyone's got people from different places, different programs, different branches. It's all different. I'm not here to judge any of that. But then moving on to the next conversation again, okay, people have a process, and now what? It's like, well, okay, now that we have a fundamental understanding that this isn't something far out of reach, that we have military personnel who have been taught, trained, and actively conducting themselves in the field using psionic training. So that's about as real as it gets for me as a soldier. Like if someone hands me a handbook of something and says, this is what we're using, next week, like study up the manual, that's about as real as it gets, because no one in the military is going to hand you a manual on some airy-fairy nonsense that doesn't work, right? It's going to be a manual that's been tested, and thoroughly vetted as this is the way we do things, and this is what functions, and this is what works. So at that point, it's a very real conversation to have. It's not a airy-fairy, imaginative conversation to have. It's a real conversation. Turns out it's about physics. A lot of people like to continue to use the word spirituality, and I like that word less and less. The older I get, the less and less I like that word. And not that I want to tell people who embrace that word in their practice that somehow that's wrong or they should feel bad about using that word. That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying is I get older, me personally. I just like the word less and less because it's amorphous. And it really kind of creates something that people can project anything onto, good or bad. And I think we've just seen far too many examples of people projecting negative ideas onto their spirituality and therefore elevating those negative ideas to something higher, in which is not correct. And so rather than talk about things in terms of spiritual laws or spiritual inevitabilities or spiritual certainties, which anybody of any particular spiritual viewpoint is going to have certain things that they believe are more certain than maybe what someone else may believe in their particular belief. But that's kind of the problem I have with spirituality, is it wants to say, here are some certainties. And I think that those certainties are not certainties. We have physics is what we have. And the physics are the certainties. And when people come up with kind of vague spiritual laws that are supposed to be based on physics, surprise, surprise, the translation doesn't always translate from the physics. And so sometimes you get a principle that someone wants to talk about as a spiritual principle that's just not quite the math of 2 + 2 = 4, like its original physical principle. And really what it turns into is 2 + 3 = 9. And it doesn't make much sense. And people end up using things that don't make much sense. So dogma is one of my main reasons for just liking the word spirituality less and less, because it almost always means an attachment to a system of rules or values which are not based on physics. And so when we're talking about meditating, when we're talking about development, when we're talking about any self-mastery, psionic skills whatsoever, we're not really talking about something that's a spiritual process, because the truth is, you can be an atheist and develop yourself psionically. You require zero amount of belief in a spiritual system, in a divine source, in God, goddess, gods, goddesses, whatever. I mean, you just don't have to believe in anything in order to develop yourself mentally and psionically, because it's all based on physics. So you don't have to believe in anything other than physics. You know, I find that believing in math is really easy. Because it's math, right? And believing in things, though, that are rules that don't always work and are amorphous and seem to also have other intentions in the rules, I think carries a lot of baggage with it. And that, I think, is a number one reason why people in the modern world that we live in, especially young people, avoid meditative practice, because they think it has to connect to some type of spiritual dogma that's going to turn them into some type of spiritually dogmatic person, when it doesn't have to. It's perfectly regular choice if you want to have it not associate with any of that and have it be your own mental, personal, mind-body process, which is fascinating in and of itself. I think the science of it is absolutely fascinating. And I would rather talk about that part of it than talk about airy-fairy things that I think may be interesting to a person's personal experience. But when, as far as myself and Kendra, when we're trying to teach people, we want to keep it basic. We want to keep it simple. We want everyone to see that it's something they can do, and it's not turning them into a different person based on, you have to think this way, you have to behave this way. None of that crap. We're super anti-cult. And so the last thing we're going to do is tell people, you have to do this way. What we're saying is, here is a simple path of how this works. If you would like to strengthen your brain and your mind muscles, here's some exercises, here's some practices, do them diligently, do them every day. Like if you want to go to the gym and, get all fit, you can't go once a week, you got to go every day. So this is the same thing. You got to do it every day and then see results. I tell students, look, I'm not telling anybody to do anything. What I'm mostly asking people to do is, hey, you might want to try meditating for a month. Here's how you do it. It's super basic. And then let people have the experience of what their brain does, how their mind feels better, how their brain feels better, how their awareness feels better, how their connection to their mind-body experience feels better, how their brain seems to think better. Maybe they're starting to get a little smarter already. I mean, which happens over time. So the benefits are to the individual who does the practice, right? I get my benefit of my practice from me doing it. I don't get any benefit from anybody doing their practice, and nobody gets any benefit from me doing my practice. So just do your own practice, see the benefit of it, just like exercise. And then, like, once you see the benefit that exercise is good for you and helps you be a healthy person, do more of that. That's really the basics of what we're encouraging. It's just, hey, here's some tools to do this thing that's not that hard. And you'll just kind of feel better probably as a person because you're doing something with your brain and your mind and your body that makes you feel better. Like exercise makes us feel better. And just, give it a try, because I just want people to experience it for themselves. I can stand here and tell stories all day long. Excuse me. I can do this, or I can do that, or I've seen someone do this, or I know people who can do that. I don't care about that. And again, people may want to hear stories, but it doesn't matter to teaching someone what they can do. To teach someone what they can do, it's like you slow it down, say, here, it's real basic, science-based. It's about your brain waves. It's about brainwave states. It's not about anything else. You don't have to like get inside and believe in someone or something or have elevated spiritual thoughts to meditate. None of that's a requirement. You just have to change your brainwave states, because meditation is a scientifically defined consciousness state that reflects a brainwave state. That's it. That's it. And to master that just takes practice. Like riding a bicycle. You get on a bicycle for the very first time and you've never ridden a bicycle before. What happens? You fall over, right? That's the first time. Anybody gets on a bicycle the first time without training wheels, they get on the bike, they try to pedal, go, whoa, and they fall over. Meditation, I think, for a lot of people is like that the first time. And they think because they fell over, they can't do it. It's like, no. It's like a bicycle. Just keep pedaling. Keep pedaling, keep pedaling, keep pedaling. Give yourself a little bit of time and you'll figure it out. Most kids, when they learn to ride a bike, it takes days, right? When my dad sat down with me, he's like, okay, let's get you on your bike, get off your trike and get you on your real bike without the training wheels. Let's do it. It took a few days of kind of wiggling and falling over and like going, and running inside, like, I don't want to do it. Like, and crying because I scraped my elbow or something. And then kind of, okay, I'm going to do this because I'm going to be a big kid. I'm going to ride my bicycle, right? And pedal without the training wheels. But it takes a few days, right? But once you learn how to ride a bike, do you stop and remember like that you fell over and it was hard and awkward? Like, no. Like you never again think about how you had to learn to ride a bike. You're just like, riding the bike is easy.
Yeah.
I think meditation is the same way. Getting on the bicycle and pedaling is a little awkward until you find your balance point. And then it's just like riding a bike.
Indeed.
Something that you just do.
Meditation is really the great non-denominational leveler for our species, Homo sapiens sapiens.
Oh, absolutely.
Not that beings in the animal kingdom don't do it, because I believe they do. But
cats do, for sure. I mean, I've watched cats, go from one state while their eyes go up and down, and then get down and do the meditative stare. Oh yeah, cats meditate for sure.
Oh yeah, and they're really cranky if they don't get their 20 hours of sleep / meditation.
Right. Yeah, my own theory there is they're spending a lot of time, in other places.
Well, they're metaphysical beings, kind of, and that's why, various things have sprung up around them. But yeah, I have to totally agree, Randy, and also the fact that that you're mentioning, I love that you're demystifying the meditation practice, because it's very important that we don't think of it as a religious or spiritual exercise. It is for anyone, as you said, from no belief systems to, pagan polytheism. It doesn't really matter. I remember when I learned to meditate so many years ago, and I myself, although I personally think all the meditation disciplines are valid, but for me, I learned transcendental meditation. Yeah. And I remember that in the group, there were a couple of nuns. There was a rabbi. Yeah. So that, that just goes to show how even the great religions accept, the forward-thinking people accept that it is and the medical medical evidence of balance of brain chemistry. It's like you said, you do it because it feels good, and you've got to be regular. And I don't know, for me, Randy, I'm going to ask you. Sometimes I have really, I would have interdimensional meditation experiences that are profound, and sometimes it's just me relaxing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like you're going to get the far out thing every time, but your subconscious and your body knows what you're doing, and it works anyway, I think.
It's a complex relationship between your brain, your mind, your subconscious, your physical body, and your cells, which people often refer to the higher self, the self and the higher self, like there's two selves. There's more than that. That's an advanced course topic, but there's more than two. And you are all of those selves also at the same time. And there's a conversation that's always happening between those selves on what's the most important, most appropriate thing to do today. And so that often guides the meditative process in a way that, I sit down always with a certain intention to do certain things. And I will do those certain things. But there's also, like, I know, kind of a free roam period of like, okay, I got to do this thing, and I got my order of things that I do because I want to make sure I get all my shizzles done when I meditate. So I go through a series of steps to go, here's my to-do list for today. And then I go, okay, there's my to-do list. And then I relax and let my brain, okay, now what we got to do? Where do we got to go? What's got to happen? And that's always different. And sometimes it feels like I'm just sitting quietly, nothing's happening, really. I'm just, okay, I guess I'm just going to sit here quietly and relax, and that's what I'm supposed to do here. Or have an experience of being in a full five sensory memory, or being in a deep lucid meditative state, like a lucid dream state. So I know I'm inside here somewhere, but I could be in a different room, on a different landscape, someplace, completely different, just like a dream, except it's lucid, or any number of other things that can occur. And I think that's also the fun part is you get to direct it some, but you also are always going to be surprised. There's just always going to be surprises. And, oh, that's interesting. That wasn't what I was thinking or looking for at all. But isn't that fascinating? Because there's a smarter part of you that knows a little better and can kind of guide the less smart part of us, which is the part that I'm talking with right now, is the less smart part of my brain than the super smart part of my brain, which is way smarter. And sometimes that part of my brain and the other parts of myself or my cells sorts that out. And so there's a part of the process that you direct, that you can plan, that you can write down, that you can make a to-do list like I do, because I'm kind of OCD and anal retentive about shit like that. Or you can just freewheel it and let the selves and your subconscious guide you on a journey of self-discovery, which is always fascinating. And I realized, I don't know, when I was younger, the words journey of self-discovery always sounded like the most boring thing to me. Like anytime I ever heard a teacher or someone talking, you're on a journey of self-discovery, I'm like, oh, that sounds so boring. How could knowing myself, be interesting? I'm so boring. I'm just 12 or whatever. And like, I don't know. That was always never a key thing until I got much older, I guess. So I feel like what I want to say is maybe something not like that. Like, it's not even about a journey of self-discovery. What it really is about is you think you know who you are. You don't. And I would just say that's true for everybody, every human being. Unless you have spent the last decades of your life as a daily meditator, then I'll give you props that you probably know yourself better than most people do. But if you're not a daily regular meditator, you think you know yourself, but you don't. And the value of knowing yourself means that you will spend less time fighting with yourself, working against yourself, sabotaging yourself, monkey wrenching yourself. Those are really the same thing. And all kinds of other things that we do with ourselves that is not productive and is dysfunctional. Because when you get to
wrong
know
relationships, picking the
right,
wrong people to associate with, either
right,
romantically or in your,
yeah,
all of it.
absolutely, all of that. When you know yourself, you know your flaws and you know your pluses. And when you know your flaws and your pluses, it's way easier to make rational decisions and judgments about what you should do, can do, ought to do with greater success, because you're not going, oh, I can totally do that, and not realize that you're not mentally, emotionally, or psychologically equipped to do that thing, because you got some shit to sort out, to know yourself about before you could really be successful at that.
Indeed.
I think that's a huge factor for a lot of people. They come up against really, a speed bump that is inside. And when you get to know yourself, then you go, oh, that's what that speed bump is. That's me doing this, or this reaction from this thing doing that. All right, how do we flatten out that speed bump? And it is that level of self-awareness and tinkering with your own mind and your own brain to make it better. And the benefits of that are really indescribable.
Yeah.
Unless you can somehow imagine that your body and your brain is like a car that works really shitty. It runs really bad. You just don't realize it runs pretty bad because you go up and down the road and everybody's cars are sputtering and spitting out smoke and making clanky noises. So you just think that everyone's car runs like a piece of shit. But they don't. It's possible to get in there and tune it and clean it up. And then all of a sudden you're like a race car, and you're like, what is happening right now? I didn't know my car could do this. And it's like, everyone's can, if they realize that they have to tune them. It's just that people don't think of their brains and their minds like a car that you have to tune, that you have to clean, that you have to change the filters, that you have to look at the wiring, that you have to make sure the electrical's working, and the pumps and the fluids and all the things, the fuel that's going in and the work that's going out, where your tires hit the road, all these metaphors that really apply to your brain and to your mind. And so you got to think about it like a thing that you can always clean, repair, improve, and buff up, like a car, like a computer or a machine, some kind of a machine that you want to use as your favorite metaphor there. It's always whatever shape you think it's in, it can be in way better shape. And the benefit and the way that you feel personally when your brain and your mind are in better shape, it's indescribable.
It is.
It's just an indescribable feeling of like, wow. I mean, let me be blunt. I think what really happened at probably by the time I was in my late 20s, and really putting a lot of personal work in my 20s because I had to, because my life was very emotionally distraught. And kind of just coming to a place, like this final place where I can say like, wow, I don't suck anymore. And like that feeling, like a genuine, sincere, like, wow, I don't feel like I suck as a person anymore. I feel like I talk to people better. I think about, how I'm interacting with people with more thoughtfulness. I think about how I talk to people with more thoughtfulness. I think about the choices I'm making with more thoughtfulness. I'm thinking about my relationships with more thoughtfulness. Wow, I just don't suck so much as a person now.
Yeah.
And that feeling of just like, oh wow, maybe it's actually possible to build and work on yourself and be a better person in this life. Maybe it's possible. And that, as a feeling of not having to accept the fate of how your parents raised you or how trauma shaped your life, is a liberating feeling that is indescribable. To be liberated from the chains of your own personal mental oppression that you don't realize is there, because you don't realize that someone put it there, or you don't understand necessarily how it put it there, or you think you got rid of it, but you didn't realize you didn't, because you haven't been digging in your subconscious with a shovel well enough to go, oh, whoa, once I shovel some poop, there's a bunch of stuff under here. Whoa, I had no idea this was all under here. And you're like, yeah, keep shoveling, but there's an end point. I want to emphasize this. So there's an end point to that cleaning process, right? It's not like, I know some therapists and people who think you have to do this process forever.
No.
I disagree. There's an ongoing maintenance process.
Mm-hmm.
There is an ongoing maintenance process, but for that initial like cleanup process, it can be finite of the amount of time you have to shovel shit in your brain for you to clean it up. And in my case, because I had so much in there, it took more than like a decade and a half, almost 2 decades. But there was an endpoint, and that endpoint was like, oh wow, I don't suck now, and I feel like I'm a decent human being, and like, wow, that makes it all worth it. Makes it all worth it that I don't walk through my life feeling like I'm a piece of shit anymore because of how my baggage and my garbage makes me not a good person.
Yeah. I think that kind of thing, those feelings of these low self-esteem and all this stuff, Randy, I in the work that I do with experiencers, I would say this is a very big commonality. That individuals who are waking up and finally becoming aware of maybe what they've done or what they didn't do, this low self-esteem, these feelings of worthlessness are really
tons of survivor guilt.
Profound. I guess that would be it, eh,
guilt.
Randy?
It's a lot of survival guilt, and it's a lot of just guilt from, oh wow, I killed a lot of people. Oh geez, that makes me a terrible person.
Yeah.
And having to sort that out. So
indeed. And would you say right now, in talking about meditation, we're talking about probably some disciplines and education that is included in your first step of your psionics training at your new educational platform. Would you say that psionics is a skill that can be or is shared galactically? Are there beings who, I know you've written about it, but are there beings that are masters of these techniques?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And so that's an interesting question. And I, from what I understand, there are a number of species, not a lot from what I understand, but I mean, when you say not a lot, you're talking about millions of species or civilizations, whatever. What's a little, what's a lot, right? So 10,000 could still be a lot or a little on that scale, right? Or 100,000 or 1.5 million different civilizations could be small or large on that scale, whatever. So scale is maybe irrelevant here, but there are some species who seem to have no propensity for psionic capacity or development. None whatsoever. None. That doesn't mean that someone can't come along and tinker with their genetics and give them the propensity and give them the ability, because that's probably more often than not what does happen. Someone comes along and says like, oh, you guys need some, well, you guys didn't get this when you were conceived, like your evolution didn't give you this one. Evolution, you screwed up again, let me correct this. And then get in there and like fix it, because evolution is a lot of like decisions being made, like where dice are being rolled every time, and it's not always the right number, it's not always the perfect number, it's not always above or below. Sometimes it's like fail, success, middle, fail, success, middle. It's all over the place. So but there are some species that don't seem to have any real natural propensity for it. But the majority, as I understand, of all life in the universe is basically psionic, like just a plant, animals, minerals. Like it's not just some species, it's like all things that have consciousness, which turn out to also be things that don't have blood pumping through their veins as well. I mean, there's things that have consciousness that we don't think of as traditionally alive, but they are. So, and there's stages of development and evolution for those things. That it also grows and enables psionic ability. And so as other species have certainly developed themselves psionically, they find themselves able to have the conversations with these other plants, animals, minerals, whatever, and realize, oh, the universe is actually very big, and there's actually information being stored and exchanged, like at all kinds of levels. So it's a very broad, like near universal experience. There's just be some number that evolve. Something happened and they didn't get it. But that doesn't mean that someone usually doesn't come along and like fix it for them and go, you guys can't live in this universe without this. We better fix this for you guys. Give you 100,000 years to adapt to it, but here you go.
Yeah.
Start getting used to it so that you don't freak out.
Oh, interesting. And when you're working with your students and they're first learning these, practicing the basic techniques, have any of your students ever reported communications, like say psychic or communications with other types of beings?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, well, there's absolutely because we sort of mentioned psionic communication, telepathic communication in the beginning course. It's definitely something that I talk about with my advanced students to expect. If you are developing yourself psionically, if you are doing this work, eventually you can expect someone or something to go, "Huh, how's it going?" And for you to hear it in your mind and go, "What? What was that? What's happening?" And for that to occur. And I also talk a bit about these fine lines between emergence and emergency, because not everybody who's hearing voices is having telepathic communication, and not everybody who's having telepathic communication is hearing voices.
True.
There is a distinct difference between a mental health breakdown of some kind or a schism of some kind that's causing stuff to come in and out or be confabulated versus an actual conversation. And there's a conversation about how to self-assess where you are as a being and a person to make sure that you're not in states of emergency, and how to recognize what states of emergency are, so that if you are crossing the line from emergence to emergency, what do you do about that? We're pretty frustrated that nobody that I know of teaches really this kind of principles. And I wish I could remember the guy's name, because it was so many years ago that I spoke to him. But a gentleman who started an organization called the Spiritual Emergence Network. I don't even think it's functioning anymore, because I think he's old and probably passed on since then. But his whole point, he was a meditator for many years and started this organization, which was very small at the time, and had a very few people working and handing out pamphlets, really. But it was just like this idea: hey, there's a fine line sometimes between spiritual emergence and spiritual emergency. And so sometimes when you're doing work, you can cross over to the limit. And what do you do with that? And his thing when I talked to him was like meditation intensives. He's like I've had to talk more people down from a meditation intensive experience, because they were like, I need to go to an intensive. I need to do 5 days of just meditating. And then they end up coming out of a meditative experience, and they see little elves or gnomes everywhere or something. And they go, oh my God, I'm freaking out. And they almost check themselves into the mental hospital. And he's got calm down.
Yeah.
You're just having a little emergency. Let's walk you back from the emergency side over to the emergent side. It's okay. And then you're fine. So there's a process. And like I said, we're frustrated that nobody talks about that or lets people know, you could trip and fall.
Yeah.
Here's how you not hit the ground. Here's how you right yourself back up. Here's how you don't get a head injury. Here's how you potentially do something that you could slip and fall and hurt yourself and not hurt yourself. Or if you do, what do you do about it? How do you deal with it so that it doesn't turn into a mental health spiral or a negative episode of some kind?
Yeah.
So there's a whole conversation, to be had about that. And psionic self-defense, obviously one of the first most important things in that. Staying centered, anchored, grounded, all these other sort of steps that keep that from happening in the first place, ways to prevent that sort of thing from happening. Those are always very important. And the slow and steady wins the race principle. You do a little bit every day. Don't do an intensive for 7 days and think you're going to just you're going to hurt yourself. More likely than not, to be honest with you. And so slow and steady wins the race, rather than doing intensives all the time and trying to just barrel through, when you're more likely in those situations to sort of snap a brain vessel or something. And people can get really messed up from it. I have a student who was a Vedic meditator, was in an ashram for years. And 2 kids who were at the ashram were there with him for years. This was in America, who decided they were going to go full on, and they were going to go to India, and they were going to become monks, and they were ready. They were ready to go do it. They went to India and spent 6 months in an ashram in India, came back here and spent 3 years in recovery from not being ready for that experience.
Oh, yeah. I
Yeah.
completely believe that. I completely, and all kinds of chemicals get really, I mean, we could be releasing DMT in unsafe amounts.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, your brain chemistry, if you're not, it's a delicate process. And if you don't treat it like a delicate process, your neurotransmitters might get a little wonky and you might have to sort that out. And which is why I would teach my students, certainly at the advanced level, how you manage to program and conduct, telling your physical body what to do. So if you have a problem, neurotransmitters are going, something's happening in your body physiologically, cortisol levels are spiking. How do you tell your body how to balance that out? Like right away, like, hey, body, cortisol levels down, okay? And have that actually work. Have your body go, okay, I can do that. We can turn it down. Cool, no problem. Instead of going, what do you mean turn the cortisol levels down? I can't do that. Like, that's a normal conversation between someone in their body when their cortisol levels are spiking, but there's a total technique and process to just dial it down, breathe, and change your state of consciousness. So self-mastery is changing your state of consciousness from one state to another state at any given time that you see fit as you will it to be. So if you're panicky, self-mastery is being able to like calm yourself down. And that isn't just about breathing and counting to 10 and like thinking positive thoughts. That's like, hey, my body's having a reaction here. I need to communicate with my body and say, hey, body, less cortisol. Like maybe a teeny little more dopamine right now, maybe a little serotonin elevation and less cortisol. Let's maybe shift some neurotransmitters here so that, okay, I feel good now. And maybe, too much DMT. Yeah, I've been meditating for 3 days straight. And I'm like, whoa, let's bring that DMT down just a little bit so that I'm not having a freaking trip in waking life. Yeah. Unless you've got the time and the space to do that. I mean, you got time and space to do that. Have fun with that. But most people don't just have the time and space to like let their brain naturally, organically start tripping out for a few days from having an intense DMT experience.
Yeah, I think that would require some preparation if that was what you were going to do. Randy, would you?
But anyway, we're always leaning towards the practical. Now, it's my final sentence. We're just always leaning towards how to take these things and be practical.
Yeah.
Always practical.
Which is a blessing because that's how this material needs to be presented because the other systems have not worked.
For real.
Period.
Yeah, for real.
The other systems do not work. So it has to be a new approach that is more appropriate for our, I think, science-based society moving through that embraces all beliefs or non-belief systems. So what you are doing, I think, is something that's on the timeline. I think that timeline is being activated with your work and Kendra's work and the work of like-minded people. We need this. We need to revitalize ourselves and get a hold of these aggressive tendencies and all this other shite that's going on, for God's sake.
Oh, yeah.
Really,
everybody needs to center and ground and calm the fuck down. Just a little bit.
Yeah,
it would make the world a better place.
It certainly would. Randy, do you feel that I'm not even sure remote viewing or astral projection, the basic step for those other disciplines would be a meditative practice, and then you build on top of that as a type of directed meditation? Or how does it work in the psionics training program?
Sure. That's pretty much just laid out in the curriculum, the way that we have thought about and laid out the curriculum, and like, this should be step one. This should be what immediately follows that step. This is what should be immediately follows step two, step three, etc. And so I'm proud that we've really, 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 really put a lot of time and energy and thinking into the curriculum, which isn't just let's throw a bunch of information at people, but let's really think, what is the order of learning, action, and doing that is easiest and best to translate and transmit that information to people so that it's the easiest for them to replicate and do. So that's all kind of baked into the curriculum, which is we start with the most basic everything, which is what's happening with your brain and your brain waves in meditative states, because the fundamental basis of all psionic development and self-mastery is meditation. And then, we just basically start stacking one thing after another on top of that. I kind of always do this thing with my hands where it's like you're starting with this little tiny ball and then you're stacking all these other things. And by the time you're done, you've got this orb that's got all these layers of things to it that's way amazing. But it starts out as this very simple, seed, core, nut, whatever in the middle that is very basic and super simplified, and you're just adding all the time. And so that's really about adding on top of meditation. You have a mind-body experience. You have an energy system. You have a psionic foci. How do you manage that? How do you clear that so that you can, because clarity turns out to be like the next most important thing, right? Is keeping your system clear, your thoughts clear, your channels clear, so that the information that's coming in and out is also clear. Psionic self-defense becomes a huge next step, so that you can keep that shit out as well as keeping your shit in, because it's very rude and impolite to go putting your thoughts and emotions into other people's personal spaces. And it's very rude for them to be doing the same. So we set space so that you can keep that out. That's a significant step. And then you can start to do things that's just the very basic, so that you can actually do some stuff. And then you start saying, okay, let's introduce something really simple. Let's introduce a simple meditation or a simple part of meditation into the other full meditation, or a simple affirmation or a simple practice that adds on top of that and adds on top of that and adds on top of that. And by the time we're at the advanced course, it's a bunch of stuff. And when we actually get to psionic skill development, it's like, okay, which is the very last thing that we do in the advanced course. Like everything we do in the beginning course and the advanced course is to get to one final point in the curriculum, which is the ability to teach people the actual skills and disciplines for psionic development. That's where the real meat, potatoes, food in the whole course really is. But you gotta know everything else. You have to, because if you don't, you're starting with the skill development without any of the understanding of where you have to build to do those skills. So I could teach those skills right away. I could teach you those skills right away. I could teach a room full of those people those skills right away. But without teaching them all the fundamentals, hammering on the fundamentals, getting them to do the fundamentals for days, weeks, and even months at a time, what's the point, right? They're basically going to get to the skill building part and they're going to go, I can't do it. I can't replicate it. You suck. You're a shitty teacher. And I'm like, no, that's what happens if I give you the end without giving you the beginning and the middle and all the stuff that you need, so that you can actually make that end product work. So it's all baked into the curriculum. And that's just about getting from point A to point B to point C to the end, where we finally can say, okay, here's the simple, like psionic skill development of these very specific skills. But now that you know all the building blocks that go into that, you spent some time working on your brain and your meditation so that your brain's a little stronger, your psions per second are a little higher output, so these skills become more doable. And when they're more doable, you have more success. And when you have more success, your brain goes, oh, I can do this. And then you progress along a path of self-mastery. If you get to that point and you go, oh, I can't do it, this sucks, you're off the path. Well, let me put it this way. As far as I understand, you set a person on the path, that's the first major juncture that's either going to keep them on the path or knock them off the path forever. Is that first success or fail of something like a real skill, skill test. I want all of our students to have the maximum potential of success at that skill building when they get to that part. So there's a maximum percentage that have a success pattern from that and don't drop off the path, and keep it as a part of their daily practice, so that they can become just whatever it means for them to be a better person, a better, smarter, stronger, faster thinking person.
Yeah. Well, so it would be a little bit like playing full contact football without any kind of padding or anything, for people who have not really done the work, done the basic work, and which is a protection. I mean, as you say, you can't just jump in there and do the advanced stuff without that basic thing going on. And this is a question I don't think I've ever asked you, Randy. Do you think that it's possible that you and Kendra chose to come into Homo sapien bodies and be here on Earth at this particular time for the incredible things that we are about to see?
I mean, I think that's true. We certainly had conversations about how we personally feel about that, and I would say my personal experience and getting to know myself of where I have been lifetimes to get to here. Yeah, there was a lot of choosing.
Yeah,
a lot of choosing to want to be in a place to do something effective and to try and help out, make the world a better place. I mean, what I think are just the basic rules of life, right? Like, I think the most basic rule of life is we come into this world, hopefully, to learn, grow, and do something that leaves it this much better than it was than when we came in, right? And that's minimal, right? That's the minimal goal of what I think a decent human being should want to do in this world. And so, whatever we can do, I know we both feel this way. Whatever we can do to just add any distinction to making the world a little better than it was when we got here, or leaving something behind it didn't have when we got here, then yay, we did we did a good job. We did something that we're supposed to do this
You did, and you are, and even Randy, before developing fully this educational protocol, talking about your personal experiences, which is not always easy, gave a lot of comfort to people, because I can tell you that there are, at this time in history, I have more participants in the secret space program coming forward than I have ever seen in my 20-year career of working in regression hypnosis. And a lot of women, because there is not a prominent woman right now discussing any of this. But I'm telling you, and I know when you first used to tell me, well, of course you had not to delve into stuff, but you had relationships, you had a wife, and in fact, there are lots of women who were participants.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And
for sure.
And I think they've been very good at pushing down their feelings and surviving.
Well, and the ones that I've encountered also are just not the type that they want to get up in front of a camera or microphone and take the personal risk to themselves or their families.
Which it is. Yeah, which it is.
Yeah, there are. Yeah.
So at every one of these people that comes to see me, I direct them to you. And before it's just your psionics classes, I direct them to you because they're all people with high PSI abilities. That's part and parcel of why I believe that you and your colleagues were chosen for your missions. That it was certainly a lot easier to teach people psionics if they have, an accelerated level of that ability from the get-go. So
I have to admit, I mean, for us, like, going over the fundamentals with people is like, I mean, we could do it in our sleep, because we've done it for so long, every day, all the time. But I think that's great, because I find that most of the time when people have questions, I don't always know if I'll have the answers, but most of the time it turns out I do. And when someone says, what's the answer to this? And I'm like, oh, I do happen to know the answer to that. Cool. So, let me help you out with that. So the ability to just, as a person who's older, when we're younger, we're trying to learn stuff. And when we get older, we get to impart learning. And so I think it just feels really good to be able to impart any learning and any experience onto people's lives that can make them avoid any amount of suffering that I had to deal with, because I didn't necessarily have anybody helping or sorting out, giving me good advice. Like I am able to give to other people. So there's plenty of times where I've said, oh, it would have been nice if there was someone like me when I was around to help me sort it out. But whatever, I got to be the first guy. That's fine. I'm happy to help. Really is the answer. I'm just really happy to help.
I think that's part of your path. it is a universe of free will, I believe. And I think that was part of your path, even the tough part in the beginning, because look at the compassion and insight that is given you. Look at what you've actually taken away from that when you take a hose and spray away the shit. Look at what you were left. You were left with incredible skills to communicate and help others, and I think it's just a blessing. And Randy, oh my God, so much fun talking to you. Before we go, I did want to talk a little bit about some of the things that you think are going to be challenging that are coming along for us as a race or species, and also maybe a little bit about what's going on in Antarctica. What is all the interest down there? What's happening down there?
So that's a difficult one for me to make any comments about.
I see.
And the reason is very specific. Any place that may or may not, I have to say may or may not, have Marine Corps personnel on duty, on site, anything that I may or may not say that could possibly or possibly not endanger or not endanger a person in that team would be something that I'm not supposed to say out loud, right?
I see.
So, and that really just gets to the point of like, there's a lot of I don't knows about that. I mean, like I know some information. There's a lot of things I could say. I don't know what the impact of me saying those things could be. So I have to err on the side of not being able to say much.
Probably
that
best.
Being said, that being said, here's what I can tell you. So the ice has been melting for a minute, right? And so as ice melts, things get uncovered. There's also been an archaeological project to remove ice. So they have these big steam blowers, basically just blow steam.
Really?
Steam
Oh God! Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. They just have these. It's like a big boiler tank on wheels that has like these big hoses on it, and it just blows out hot steam on the ice, and the ice just gently melts away so they can clear away in the ice around any of the artifacts, objects, materials, buildings, whatever. So they've been uncovering stuff for better part of the last decade and a half, probably. And so there's a lot going on down there, and there's always been the speculation over. Let me say that another way. There are parties involved who are having discussions over whether this is finally time to let everybody know. Like saying, look, this is not just like a ship that crashed. This is not just like someone saw something in the sky. This is not just going to look at the pyramids and going, this is very strange. This is like a completely different level of archaeological find. And to the point where, a lot of the people having the conversation are like, look, this is not modern stuff, right? This is not modern stuff that we should be or have to keep a secret about. This is ancient history stuff that everyone should just know is ancient history. And so there's a debate and a conversation that I understand is having between the parties present, and there are those who are obviously in favor of bringing a news crew down and taking a bunch of pictures and sending somebody back with a story for 60 minutes or whatever they want to do it. And there are those who are just like, no, we can't do that. We can't possibly do that. And then there are those who are just assholes, but we know who those people are. So so it's a complex scenario, and let's just say that not everybody agrees, and it's a little bit of a Mexican standoff. That's about all I can say.
We'll see what happens. We'll see what the timeline activates, but there certainly is a lot of interest, and it certainly, I personally believe that there was a massive Hyperborean civilization. And the poles shifted, and what was tropical is now covered in ice. It's not that and these beings were most likely space worthy. So we'll see what happens, Randy. And now tell me, please, how everybody can get in touch with you to register for your classes, to look at your curriculum, the whole thing.
Sure. Our webpage is www.universityofconsciousevolution.com. We also have a Facebook page that is universityofconsciousevolution.com, and Instagram and a Twitter, I think, as well. If people want to follow stuff on there where we post our regular stuff that we post every day. We post little blurbs and we're doing videos. We're actually churning out content right now. So if people want to go to the website, they can see how to get in touch with us personally for consults, what the classes are, how to sign up, what the links for the classes are, everything else that we're doing, what we're planning on doing, what's coming, links to interviews as we get them and they go up, that now that I'm back doing interviews, that we'll be posting and putting links and clips and stuff up. So people want to go and check out all our stuff there. Our website is really the place to go and see everything and be able to communicate, see what's going on, drop us a line, signed up on a mailing list, or one of the future courses that we've got planned. We got waiting lists, for those too, because we got a basic course, we got the advanced course, we got a mini manifesting course that we're going to do, and then Kendra's got her emotional healing course, and then we got about this many more that we're thinking about. And so we got a lot of ideas for content and how to put it together without just making gigantic beginning and advanced courses, which is kind of what at first we were thinking, well, these are just going to be so huge. I'm like, all right, let's break some stuff up here, because I think we're just going to end up. My whole point is not wanting to overwhelm people, but to make sure content is contained. Right. And so I think we're just going to break it up into all of the individually digestible pieces that make sense, and things that answer different questions for people. Like, everyone wants, how do I manifest better? Okay, we figured out how we're going to put together everything we know about all the physics, mind, body things that are happening to find your sweet spot in manifesting. Make a mini course and charge like $55 for it so everyone can get the manifesting course. And people who are like, oh, I got some shit to sort out. The emotional healing course is because, when you've already got some shit to sort out, maybe you need a little bit more guidance than just sort it out. And so Kendra's got an amazing set of tools and experience at helping people sort their emotional shit out.
Oh, bless your heart.
I can do that. I just hate doing it.
I know. I know.
I have the tools and skills too. I just hate doing it. I know.
I know you do.
I'm a Marine too, and part of me is just like, sort that shit out. Like that's But I know that's not always the best way to do it.
Well, that's why it's a
person. But she's got a course for that.
It's a perfect situation where you're going to cover everybody's needs. And anyway, I just want to thank you and Kendra for this amazing work that you're doing and for chatting with us today. And I want to tell you, in my little meditations, I'm always sending you guys positive energy, because I know that it's I've known you a long time now. I've seen you pass through different things, but I know this is your time. I know. I'm getting chills right now.
That's pretty good.
I know it. It feels good. It feels good, and you look pretty good, man.
That's. I quit drinking. I got off sugar and changed my diet, and so I got way healthier.
Well, bless your heart, Randy. Thank you again, and folks out there at Contact TV, I'm thanking you for tuning in or listening in or whatever you're doing. And we will have new content up every 2 weeks throughout the entire winter into the summer months. So everybody, surround yourself with white light and look into Randy's program, because it can be, and it is life-changing. Okay. And remember, we are not alone. Bye-bye now. Bye, Randy. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for watching Contact TV.
We would like to thank our generous sponsors: Lightwork Hypnosis, Euphoria and the Euphoria Chronicles, Earth Mystery News, Conspiracy Culture Books, MUFON Canada, Free Experiencers, the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters, and Variety Store Productions.
For guest booking information, please email Wes Roberts at producer@contacttv.ca. And don't forget to join us on Facebook and Twitter.